Utbah pelted him with stones. One of the stones fell on his face. His lower right incisor, the tooth that is between a canine and a front tooth, was injured. His lower lip was wounded. He was also attacked by Abdullah, who cleaved his forehead. Abdullah means a humiliated woman, who was an obstinate strong horseman, struck him violently on his shoulder, was his sword, and that stroke hurt the Messenger of Allah for over a month. Though it was not strong enough to break his two armors, he dealt a heavy blow on his cheek. It was so strong that 2 rings of his iron-ringed helmet penetrated into his holy cheek. "Take this stroke from me, I am Ibn," he said while striking the messenger of his sword. The Messenger of Allah replied while he was wiping the blood flowing on his face, "I implore Allah to humiliate you." Is stated his incisor broke. His head was cleaved, and that he started wiping the blood off it and saying, "I wonder how can people who cut the face of their prophet and break the incisor of his, he who calls them to worship Allah, how can such people thrive or be successful?" About that incident, Allah, glory is to him, sent down a Quranic verse saying, "Not for you, O Muhammad, but for Allah is the decision whether he turns in mercy to pardons them or punishes them. Verily, they are the Zalimun, polytheists, disobedience, and wrongdoers." States that the Prophet said, "Allah's wrath is great on those who besmear the face of his messenger," observed silence for a short while, and then resumed saying, "O Allah, forgive my people, for they have no knowledge." In Sahih Muslim, it is stated that the Messenger of Allah said, "My Lord, forgive my people, for they have no knowledge." A book by Ayad al-Qadi, it is related that the Prophet said, "O Allah, guide my people, for they have no knowledge." It is quite certain that killing the Prophet was their primary aim, but the 2 Qurayshites, Sa'd and Talha, who showed great and rare courage and fought so fiercely and boldly that though they were only 2 were able to stop the idolaters short of realizing their aim. They were of the best skillful Arab archers and kept on militating in defense of the Messenger of Allah till the whole squad of idolaters were driven off him. The Messenger of Allah emptied his quiver of arrows and said to Sa'd, "Shoot an arrow, may my father and mother be sacrificed for you." The Prophet had never gathered his parents except in the case of Sa'd, a privilege granted to him for his efficiency. In a version by Jabir, authorized by An-Nasai, concerning the attitude of Talha towards the gathering of idolaters around the Messenger of Allah, when there were only some helpers with him. Jabir said, when the idolaters reached him, the Messenger of Allah said, "Who will suffice us their evils? Fight them back." Talha said, "I will." Then Jabir mentioned the advance of the helpers to fight and how they were killed, one after the other, in a similar way to Muslim's narration. When all the helpers were killed, Talha proceeded forward to fight as much as the other 11 ones did, till his hand was hurt and his fingers were cut off. So he said, "Be they cut off." The Prophet said, "If you had said, 'In the name of Allah,' the angels would have raised you up before the people's very eyes." Then he said, Allah drove the idolaters off them in Al-Ikhlil, A book by Hakim, it is stated that Talha had sustained 39 or 35 wounds, and his fingers, the forefinger and the one next to it, got paralyzed. In a version by Case, authorized by al-Bukhari, he said, I saw the hand of Talha paralyzed. That was because he protected the Prophet with it in Uhud battle. Stated that the Prophet then said about Talha, he who desires to see a martyr walking on the ground, let him to look at Talha. Abu, on the authority of Aisha, said, whenever Uhud day battle was mentioned, Abu Bakr used to say, that was Talha's day battle. Abu Bakr recited a verse of poetry about him. O Talha, paradise is due to you as water springs are due to the deer to drink out of. At the awkward and most delicate circumstances, Allah, glorious to him, sent down his invisible help. In a version by Sa'd, cleared and authorized in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, he said, I saw the Messenger of Allah on Uhud day with two men dressed in white defending him fiercely. I have never seen similar to them neither before Uhud nor after it. In another version, he means to say that they were Gabriel and Michael. All those events happened in no time. If the Prophet's elite companions had realized the grave situation immediately, they would have rushed on the spot and would not have left him sustained. These wounds, unfortunately, they got there after the Messenger of Allah had been wounded and 6 of the helpers killed. The 7th was staggering under the brunt of wounds and desperately militating in defense of the Prophet. However, as soon as they arrived, they encircled the messenger with their bodies and weapons and were alert enough to prevent the enemies from reaching him. The first one who returned to give him was his cave mate Abu Bakr. In a version by Aisha, recorded in Ibn, she narrated that Abu Bakr had said when it was Uhud day and at the time that the Prophet was left behind, I was the first to go back and see him. Before him I saw a man fighting to shield him from the enemies. I said to myself, I wish he were Talha. Let my father and mother be sacrificed for you. O Allah, let him be Talha. Let my parents be sacrificed for you. On the way I was overtaken. By Abu Ubaidah, who was then moving as swiftly as a bird, we both rushed to dress the Prophet's wounds. There we found that Talha suffering from serious wounds before the Messenger of Allah. The Prophet said, see to your brother his deed entitled him for an abode in paradise. I noticed that toothed rings of the iron-ringed helmet had penetrated his cheek, so I set out to take them out, but Abu demanded by Allah, O Abu Bakr, I beseech you, let me do it myself. Fearing to hurt the Prophet, he started pulling one of the 2 rings out very slowly and carefully with his mouth. Then he pulled the arrow out by his mouth too. Consequently, his front tooth fell. Then I proceeded to pull the second out, but Abu besought me to leave it. O Abu, I adjure you by Allah to let me do it. He pulled the second ring very slowly and carefully with his mouth till it came out. The Messenger of Allah said, see to your brother, he has proved to be worthy of being housed in paradise. We approached Talha to cure him, but found out that he had some 10 sword strokes in his body. This showed him efficiently Talha had fought and struggled on that day. At those awkward moments of that day, a group of Muslim heroes gathered around the Prophet, forming a shield to protect him from